You've made it. Come in. Let me set this down where the lamp can reach it. There. A photograph. Small and older than it looks, the paper gone. The soft grey nobody quite prints anymore. A couple left it with me this evening. They sat a long while by the fire, the two of them, easy with each other in that way. People are when they've had a great deal of practice at it, and when they stood to go. The woman folded it into my hand and asked me to keep it somewhere it would last. Here, look. It's nothing much on the face of it. A market street after rain, the cobbles still shining, the light gone low and gold, a whole crowd of people each off about their own afternoon, and not one of them looking at whoever held the camera. An ordinary hour on an ordinary street. And yet they've carried it with them for the whole of their lives and asked me, a stranger, to keep it safe forever. There's a reason for that. There always is, with the things people can't put down. But you'd never find it just by looking. So they told me the reason, and I've written it down near as I could keep it. It's called In Passing. Get comfortable, dear Insomniac. Let the night carry on outside without you. The man who took the photograph was called Owen, and he was young when he took it, and still finding his way into it. And he'd have been the first to say so. He wasn't a professional, not then. He'd bought a second-hand camera he couldn't quite afford, and taught himself with it, out on the streets, on the evenings and afternoons he could spare from the job that actually paid him. Most of what he brought home was ordinary, and now and then something better slipped through that he couldn't quite account for. He kept at it because he loved the doing of it, which is as good a reason as any, and better than most. What he loved was the streets after rain. He'd worked that much out. Everything took on a shine, and the light went long and low and generous, and a market putting itself back together after a shower had a particular life to it that he could stand and watch for an hour and never tire of. He liked the crowds, the whole ordinary churn of people, each folded down into some small business of their own, buying, haggling, hurrying, none of them minding him at all. He wasn't after anyone in particular. He was after the street, the shape of a wet afternoon full of people, and the way the sun came sideways down it. And there was one afternoon, early on, that seemed at the time no different from 100 others. The rain had been and gone. One of those quick, hard showers that empties a street and then thinks better of itself. And the market had come back out into the wet, blinking, steaming faintly, the cobbles running gold with the low sun. Owen worked the corner for the better part of an hour. That's the unglamorous truth of the thing. He mostly stood still, in one decent spot, and let the afternoon come to him, lifting the camera now and then and lowering it again. A fruit stall under its striped awning, a dog asleep against a doorpost, entirely committed to it. A woman haggling with her whole face. He took the frame because he liked the whole of it. The light, the crowd, the shine, the market gathering itself up again after the rain. He took several, working the scene, and paid no particular mind to any single soul in it, because the whole point of them was that they were the crowd. Then the sun shifted off the cobbles, and he moved along, and thought no more about it. He developed the role that night. Most of it was ordinary, as most of it always was. But that one frame of the market held together better than he'd managed before, every corner of it alive at once, and he couldn't have told you how he'd done it, which was rather the trouble with the good ones. He was pleased with it in a quiet, surprised sort of way. He made a few prints, because he was proud enough to want to, and gave one to a friend, and let another go for next to nothing, when a little cafe near the market hung a handful of local pictures on its wall for a spell. Then the print went off into the world, the way a cheap print does, hand to hand, wall to drawer, and Owen forgot he'd ever let it go. The years did what years do. He got better. Not all at once, and never as fast in a season as he'd have liked. But a person who keeps turning up gets better whether he means to or not, and Owen kept turning up. The first time someone paid him properly for a photograph, he walked home feeling as though the pavement had gone slightly springy underfoot. A shop front for a catalogue. A portrait of a man who wanted to look trustworthy on a leaflet. Small things at first, and then steadier ones. For a good while, the work that paid and the work he loved were two different things, and he did the one to afford the other, and didn't much mind the arrangement. He still went out after the rain. That never left him. Even in the busy stretches, when there were more commissions than hours, he'd take himself off to a wet street and stand in the good light and watch the crowd go by, for no reason he could have explained to anyone. And slowly, the way it actually happens without any single door swinging open, the two things grew into one. People began asking for exactly the sort of picture he'd only ever made for himself, the true look of a thing, rather than a tidy arrangement of it. He made a good living at it in the end, and a life he was fond of. He never became a name you'd see up in lights. He was the name that got passed quietly from one friend to the next, the one you called when you wanted your day kept honest. It suited him down to the ground, which is how Owen, some years into a career he'd grown quietly proud of, came to be photographing a wedding. He didn't take many of those, but someone had recommended him to someone, kindly, and the couple had said they didn't want the whole day posed and fussed over until none of it felt like them. They'd heard he was good at letting a day simply be itself. He liked the sound of that far too much to say no. He arrived early, because arriving early is 9/10 of standing about usefully. The hall was a long room with tall windows down one side, and the light through them was low and gold and patient, and he stood in it a while and thought that whatever else the day did, there would at least be that. People were still setting up. Somebody was losing an argument with a run of bunting, and along the wall by the door was the table. Every wedding has one. A little table of photographs telling the whole happy story of how two people had arrived at this day. The pair of them as children, gap-toothed and helpless with laughter, birthdays and seasides and long-ago holidays, the faces of all the people who'd had a hand in getting them here, beaming out across the years. A gathered-up history of two lives, set where the room could share it. Owen walked past. Then he stopped, came back, and stood very still. In among all the close little portraits, in a plain black frame larger than the rest, was a wet market street under a low gold sun. A whole crowd of strangers, each minding a private afternoon, the cobbles shining from a shower long since blown over. His street, his crop, that soft grey he'd only ever pulled off paper. They'd stopped making a long time back. Propped against the frame, a small card, the day we were both there, before we ever met. Photographer unknown. He stood over it a good while. He knew that picture, the way you know your own handwriting. He had made it, long ago, when he was still nobody's photographer but his own. What he could not work out was how it had come to be here, at the heart of a wedding he'd been hired into by strangers, nor who the two people were, propping it up as though it were the beginning of everything. But it wasn't his moment, and it wasn't his day. So he tucked the wonder in the way where he kept things that could wait, and went to work. He photographed the ceremony, and photographed it well. Every honest hour of it, and not one soul made to stand on a staircase and hold a smile. He caught the groom's mother pretending to have something in her eye during the vows, and then giving that up. He caught the two of them turning to face the room as married people for the first time, both slightly stunned by it, as the best of them always are. And then the long gold afternoon tipped over into evening, and the ceremony gave way to the party, and the room filled with the good loose noise of people who'd cried a little earlier, and were making up for it now. It was somewhere in the thick of that. Plates cleared, music started, a small boy conducting a raid on the cake table that Owen photographed and told no one about, that he found himself standing near the memory table again, and the bride came and stood beside him. Nora had swapped her good shoes for the ones she could dance in, and she had the flushed, unguarded look of a person whose enormous day has gone exactly right. She followed his eye to the market photograph and smiled. "That's my favorite thing in the whole room," she said. "You keep looking at it." So did I, all through setting up. "It's a good picture," Owen said. His voice came out level, which pleased him afterward. "It's more than that. Come here. You can't see it properly from where you're standing." She drew him a step closer and pointed, not quite touching the glass. "That's me, right there, at the fruit stall, sulking at a plum. I was 20. I've no memory of the afternoon at all. Why would I? Nothing happened. I bought some fruit, and I went home." "And him?" said Owen. Because he'd already followed her arm to the woman at the stall, and some old habit had sent his eye across the frame, hunting the balance of the thing. "There." She moved her finger all the way over to a young man stopped in the crowd, reading something folded in his hand. "That's Alex. My Alex. Same street, same afternoon, same hour. 30 feet apart, near enough, and neither of us with the least idea the other was alive. We didn't meet for another 6 years. A friend sat us next to each other at a supper, and that was that." She shook her head, still half amazed by it. "We'd been together a good while, living in each other's pockets, this wedding already as good as promised, before we ever found this out." "How did you find it out?" Her whole face softened. "It was Alex's picture first, if you can believe it. He'd bought this print years before he ever met me. Cheap, off a cafe wall, because he liked the look of a wet market. And he'd hung it in every place he ever lived. Never gave the little figures in it a second glance. Why would you? They're the crowd." She smiled. "Then, one evening, not long after I'd moved in with him, I was going past it with a cup of tea, and something stopped me dead. I said, 'I know that awning. That's my mother's old market. I'd have known it anywhere.' And I leaned right in close. And there I was, 20 years old, scowling at a plum." She pressed her fingers to her mouth a moment. "So I called him over to laugh at it with me. Imagine, you've had a picture of me on your wall for years and never known." And he came, and he looked, and he went very quiet. And then he put his finger down on that man across the crowd, reading, not looking at a soul, and he said, in the strangest voice, "Nora, that's my old coat. That's me." Owen said nothing at all. He'd owned a photograph of the both of us for years, and never known either of us was in it. We came within a few strides of meeting that afternoon, and then walked off our separate ways, and some stranger with a camera happened to catch us doing it. She looked back at the frame with enormous fondness. "So no, it isn't the day we met. It's better than that, I've always thought. It's the day we didn't. I've wanted to find the man who took it for as long as we've known about it. Not to make a fuss of him. Well, a little, but to tell him what he'd kept safe without meaning to. He was only standing in a wet street somewhere, minding the light." She laughed at herself and turned to him properly, the way people do when they've decided to stop being sad at a party. "But listen to me. You do this every day. You must have thousands of your own. Not weddings. The ones you actually love. Go on, show me one." And Owen, who had been holding something very still in his chest for the better part of the day, found that his hands had already gone to his pocket. He kept his favourites on his phone. Scans of the old prints, the pictures that had made him, carried about the way other people carry photographs of their children. He turned the screen to her and began, gently, to scroll. A wet lane at dusk, one lit window at the far end of it. A woman outside a bakery with her eyes shut, having a private moment with the smell of it. A man and a child at a bus stop, both pursing their lips to whistle, both producing nothing whatsoever, both entirely delighted. "Oh," Nora said softly at each one. "Oh." And then his thumb moved once more, and the screen filled with a wet market street under a low gold sun, the cobbles shining, the striped awning, the whole ordinary crowd of a long-ago afternoon, and Nora stopped breathing. She looked at the phone. She looked at the frame on the table. She looked back at the phone. "That's ours," she said very quietly. "That's Owen. That's the one on our table. Why is that on your?" She didn't finish it. She didn't need to. He watched her arrive at the whole of it, all at once. The way you arrive at the edge of a step you didn't know was there. "I wondered," Owen said, "when I saw it this morning. I couldn't think how you'd come to have it. I made that a very long time ago, standing in the rain across the road, when I was young and still finding my feet, only trying to catch the light." He turned the phone back to himself and looked at it a moment, the market he'd stood in so many years before. "I never knew where it went. I never knew who was in it. I only knew it was the best thing I'd done so far, and I let it go for almost nothing and forgot it." For a moment, Nora couldn't say anything at all. Then she put both hands over her mouth, and her eyes went bright, and she said, muffled, "Stay right there. Do not move." And she picked up the front of her dress in both fists and went off across the crowded room at something close to a run, calling a name over the music. She came back towing Alex by the hand. Alex in his good waistcoat with his tie already loosened, laughing, bewildered, asking her what on earth, what is it, what's happened? And she brought him up short in front of Owen and could only point, first at the man, then at the phone still in his hand, then at the photograph on the table, back and forth, until the words caught up with her. "It's him," she managed. "Alex. It's him." He took it. "The market. The day we didn't meet. He's the one who was standing there. He's been standing there this whole time, taking our photograph at our own wedding. And he's him." Alex looked at Owen for a long moment. And then this great, tall, grinning man went entirely still and soft and put out his hand. And when Owen took it, he held on with both of his and didn't let go and didn't seem able to say a single word, which Nora said afterward was the only time in his life she had ever known it to happen. They stood, the three of them, in the middle of a wedding going on without them, and Owen told them the things they'd never known. That the market had steamed after the rain, that a dog had slept through the whole of it against a doorpost, that he'd stood at that corner for an hour, and that they were somewhere in more than one frame of the roll, passing, each in their own afternoon, closer at some moments than either of them had ever guessed. That he had loved that picture without ever once knowing there was a story folded up inside it, waiting. Then Nora and Alex were carried off back into their own party, as a bride and groom always are. But they kept finding him across the room for the rest of the night, and every time they caught his eye, they smiled at him, as though he'd given them something, which, without meaning to, long ago, he had. And Owen went back to work, because that was the best gift he had to give them now, and he gave it well. He caught the two of them dancing badly and not minding. He caught an old man asleep and content in a corner while the noise went on around him. He caught the small, unwatched half-seconds all round the edges of the night, the ones nobody arranges, the ones almost nobody is looking at, because that was the only thing he had ever really known how to do, and this, of all nights, was a good one to do it on. Last of all, when the evening had worn itself soft and low, he caught the pair of them in the doorway, heads together, letting the room roar on behind them without needing them for a minute. Then he packed his bag and skipped quietly out into the evening and left them to the end of their day. He walked home the long way that evening, in the last of the good light, an empty bag on his shoulder. There was a corner near his home that had always been generous to him, and he stopped at it out of habit more than hope, and watched the street go by in its ordinary crowds. A woman glancing up at the sky for no reason at all. A man carrying a cake box with tremendous care. 2 children deep in a grave negotiation over a dropped mitten. And there, among all of it, a young man reading a folded paper by a lamppost, attending to nothing, and not far off, a young woman waiting to cross, checking her bag, in her own evening entirely, the 2 of them near enough to touch, and no notion of each other at all. Owen lifted the camera. He took one frame, the small, quiet shutter, like a door closing in another room, and lowered it, and didn't wait to see whether either of them ever turned, because that was never really his to know. A few days on, a parcel arrived for the couple. A thick, handsome album of the whole wedding, every honest hour of it, from the argument with the bunting to the last soft moment in the doorway. They turned it page by page at the kitchen table, with the tea going and the afternoon light coming in. The ceremony, the dancing, the boy at the cake table, the old man asleep in his corner. The whole day given back to them true, and on the very last page, alone, was one more photograph. Not a wedding picture. A wet market street under a low gold sun, a striped awning, an ordinary crowd. The day they were both there before they ever met. But not the worn cafe print they'd loved for years, passed hand to hand until the greys had gone soft. This one had been made fresh by his own hand, from the original, sharp and deep and clear, so that you could see, right across the crowd, a young woman scowling at a plum, and a young man reading, 30 feet and 6 long years from ever knowing her name. Beneath it, in plain handwriting, Owen had written only, "I kept it safe without knowing whose it was. Now it's yours from the man who took it, with love on your day." There, that's the story that came with the photograph, and the 2 of them can sit together on my desk tonight. The picture, and the words for it. And in the morning I'll find them a good place on the shelves. I keep thinking of those 2, 30 feet apart on a wet street, each quite certain that nothing at all was happening, and a whole life quietly getting itself ready, just out of sight, folded up in a picture on a cafe wall, passed from hand to hand for years and years, waiting to find its way home. There's more of that about than any of us could ever count, I suspect. Afternoons that turn out to have mattered, long after we've walked off and forgotten them. But you needn't go hunting for yours tonight. Nothing to look for, nothing to catch, nowhere to be. Whatever's kept you up has been set down at the door with everything else, and it will still be there in the morning, should it turn out you want it back. Let your eyes close, dear Insomniac. Sleep well. I'll leave the lamp lit, as I always do.